I was in the cafeteria when the assistant principal announced, "Is Jose still at lunch?" My class teacher responded, "Yes, he's here." My boy Oscar nudged me. "Dude, what the hell did you do?" That's when we heard it. Brrrr. Helicopters were filling the schoolyard. "Attention all students. Return to your classrooms immediately. This is a lockdown." Everyone ran at once. Miss Kelly's hand was digging into my arm. "Jose, has anyone unusual tried to contact you recently?" "What?" "No." She pulled me away from the windows just as the helicopter noise became deafening. The lights went out. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Everything's going to be okay. I promise." Someone behind us muttered, "Maybe it's ICE." The principal spoke again. "To all staff and students, code yellow. I repeat, code yellow. Counseling staff to designated areas." A spotlight swept across the windows. Everyone dropped to the floor. Miss Kelly pushed me under a table, her radio crackling with voices I couldn't understand. Mr. Adoran appeared out of nowhere, shirt soaked with sweat. "Jose, get to the conference room, now!" I followed him out, trying to look normal while my heart was beating out of my chest. The hallways were full of cops. One cop looked directly at me, and his hand moved to his gun. Mr. Doran stepped between us. "He's with me." One cop spoke into his radio as we passed. I caught 2 words: package secured. My mind went straight to the bag of Mary Jane that I kept in my locker, but I played it cool. More cops ran past toward the gym. Someone shouted about medical equipment, head trauma, but we kept moving. Mr. Doran's hand was firm on my back, pushing me forward. "Jose, just so we're clear, you haven't been involved in anything illegal, right? Sometimes kids from your background get mixed up in things." Before I could respond, he opened the conference room door and shoved me inside. The room was dark except for the emergency lights. Miss Kelly followed us in. Click. The door locked. Just the 3 of us. She sat down across from me. There were tears streaming down her face. I had to fight back nervous laughter. "Jose," her voice cracked. "Honey." That word made my blood freeze. Teachers don't say honey unless something terrible has happened. There's been an accident. The helicopters were still circling outside. This morning, at the warehouse where your dad works, a shelving unit collapsed. Your father was... She stopped, took a shaky breath. "He didn't make it, Jose. I'm so sorry." I started laughing. "This is a crazy prank, even for you, Mr. Doran." I saw the helicopters, the police officers. They locked eyes with each other, and I saw Miss Kelly nod like she was silently agreeing to give the full explanation. Turns out, the principal was calling for me right when a student had fallen through the gym skylight during maintenance. A coincidence that made everyone think the helicopters and manhunt were connected to me. It felt like someone had drained all the color out of my heart. I curled up into a ball and started rocking back and forth uncontrollably. I was an orphan. Someone else entered the room, a woman with a clipboard and a blazer that screamed social worker. She started talking about emergency placement, foster care. I grabbed my VP from my pocket, not even caring that Mr. Doran was standing right there. Miss Kelly rubbed my back while I heaved. "Well," the social worker said, looking at her clipboard, "this is what happens when these immigrants don't follow simple safety rules." She shook her head. "Your people need to learn that." "Excuse me?" I looked up, tears still streaming. Mr. Doran cleared his throat. "What she means is, these accidents are unfortunately common in certain communities." Even Miss Kelly nodded. "I didn't want to be the one to say it, but Jose, your people just don't follow safety rules. It's always the same with them. I've seen it 100 times." The social worker continued filling out forms. "At least with foster care, you'll be in a more stable environment." Usually I didn't care about my teacher's racism, but something inside me snapped. This was my dad. My dad who died trying to give me a future. "My people!" My voice broke completely. "My dad's dead. He's dead! And you're sitting here!" I couldn't breathe. "He's not even cold yet, and you're already..." I was sobbing now, snot running down my face. "Just say it. Say the Mexican deserved it. Say it." The room went silent. Miss Kelly reached for me, but I jerked away. "Don't touch me." That night in foster care, my phone exploded with texts and calls, all from the school. The first voicemail was angry. By the 10th, they were practically begging me not to press charges. I kept staring at my phone screen until my eyes burned from the brightness in the dark room. The voicemails played on repeat through my earbuds while I lay on this strange bed that smelled like old fabric softener. Each message got more desperate than the last one. The principal's voice went from angry to worried to basically begging by the 10th call. My foster mom knocked on the door, asking if I needed anything, but I couldn't even form words to answer her. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my chest wouldn't stop shaking no matter how many deep breaths I took. The room was small with posters about house rules stuck everywhere on the walls. Bedtime at 10, shower schedule posted on the bathroom door. No guests without permission written in big red letters. I was sharing this space with some kid who kept staring at me from the other bed. He looked maybe 12 and hadn't said a word since the social worker dropped me off. Everything in this place smelled like cheap air freshener trying to cover up something worse underneath. My phone kept buzzing with new texts from the school officials trying to do damage control about what happened. The latest voicemail from the principal said there had been a big misunderstanding about what was said in that conference room. I saved every single message to the cloud and made backup copies on my laptop just in case. That weird text from earlier popped up on my screen again while I was scrolling through everything. The one that said everything would be okay, sent right when the helicopters showed up. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, and when I tried calling it back, it went straight to a generic voicemail. My skin crawled thinking someone had been watching me this whole time without me knowing. I couldn't sleep at all that first night on this scratchy mattress that smelled like bleach. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's face and heard Miss Kelly's voice saying those words about my people. My stomach churned until I had to run to the bathroom and throw up twice. The other kid in my room pretended to be asleep, but I could tell he was watching me stumble back to bed. Morning came too fast, and the foster mom, Connie, knocked saying breakfast was ready. She made eggs and toast even though I told her I wasn't hungry at all. She wrote me a note excusing me from the school for the next few days while we figured things out. When she asked if I had any family she should contact, I mentioned Uncle Enrique, but we hadn't talked in 2 years. There was some family drama about money that made him and my dad stop speaking to each other. Connie said she'd try to find his number through CPS and see if he could take me in. My phone buzzed with a text from Oscar asking if I was okay, because everyone at the school was talking. He heard rumors about ice raids and drug busts, but nobody knew the real truth about my dad dying. I didn't have the energy to type out the whole story, so I just sent back that I was fine. Later that morning, I sat at Connie's kitchen table listening to the saved voicemails again with a notebook. I wrote down every single racist thing they said word for word in blue pen. Miss Kelly had called us these immigrants, like we weren't even human beings worth respecting. Mr. Adoran said kids from that background always get mixed up in illegal stuff without knowing anything about me. The social worker said my people don't follow safety rules, like it was our fault my dad died. My hands shook as I typed it all into a document on my laptop for safekeeping. An email notification popped up from the school district's main office about the whole situation. They called everything that happened a big miscommunication and invited me to a meeting to clear things up. The tone was so fake nice that it made me want to scream at my computer screen. They were obviously scared about what I might do with all this evidence I had saved. Good, I thought. They should be scared after what they said about my dead father. That afternoon, the phone rang, and Connie answered before handing it to me looking worried. It was a CPS caseworker calling about paperwork and asking about extended family for possible placement options. Her voice sounded bored, like I was just another file on her desk to process. She asked for names and phone numbers of any relatives who might be able to take me. When I mentioned Uncle Enrique, she said they'd look into it, but I shouldn't get my hopes up. The whole system moved slow, and lots of kids stayed in foster care for months waiting for family. After she hung up, I went back to my temporary room and curled up on the bed. The other kid was at the school, so I finally had some privacy to really break down and cry. Everything kept hitting me in waves that my dad was really gone, and I was alone now. These people at the school had shown who they really were when they thought nobody was recording them. My phone had 37 unread messages from different school people, all trying to cover their tracks now. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram, my fingers shaking as I started typing out everything that happened. The words came out fast and messy about how they told me my dad died and then called us those names. I wrote about Miss Kelly saying my people don't follow safety rules while I was sitting there crying about my dad. I wrote about Mr. Doran assuming kids from my background get mixed up in illegal stuff. I wrote about the social worker talking about us like we were animals who needed training. My thumbs flew across the screen, typing and deleting and typing again, trying to get the words right. I stared at the post button for like 10 minutes but couldn't make myself tap it. Part of me wanted everyone at the school to know what these teachers really thought about kids like me. Another part of me just wanted to curl up and disappear forever. I closed the app without posting and threw my phone on the bed. Connie knocked on the door and came in with a glass of water and sat on the edge of my bed. She said she'd gotten a call from the school about some meeting they wanted to have with me tomorrow. She told me she'd come with me if I wanted because she'd been through this system before with other foster kids. She said the school always tries to make things go away quick when they mess up this bad. I didn't really trust her yet, but I needed someone who knew how this stuff worked. That night I couldn't sleep at all and kept hearing those helicopter sounds in my head over and over. Every time I closed my eyes I saw my dad's face and heard those awful words they said. The other kid in my room was snoring, but I just laid there staring at the ceiling, feeling completely alone. Something inside me got harder and angrier as the hours passed by. They wanted to erase what happened to my dad and pretend they never said those things about us. I wasn't going to let them get away with it, and decided right then I was going to that meeting. The next morning, Connie drove me to the school district office in her old Toyota that smelled like coffee and air freshener. The meeting was in this big conference room with way too many adults sitting around a long table. There was the principal, and some lady from the district, and someone from HR taking notes on a laptop. They kept talking about policies and procedures and appropriate communication protocols, but nobody would say what actually happened. They used big words like miscommunication and unfortunate circumstances, while avoiding the actual racist stuff that was said. My jaw hurt from clenching it so tight while they danced around the real issue. I pulled out my phone and found the voicemail, where they were begging me not to misinterpret their comments about my community. I hit play on speaker and set it on the table so everyone could hear Miss Kelly's voice clearly. The room went completely silent as her voice filled the space, saying she didn't mean it that way. The HR person started typing super fast on her laptop, and the district lady's face turned red. Finally, someone was actually listening to what really happened instead of trying to cover it up. After the meeting, I sat in Connie's car and opened Instagram again, with my hands still shaking from anger. This time I posted my story, but only to close friends, so like 30 people could see it. Within an hour, someone had taken a screenshot and shared it to their story with more people. My phone started going crazy with notifications from kids at the school I hadn't talked to in months. Some were saying they were sorry about my dad, and others were shocked about what the teachers said. A few kids shared their own stories about racist stuff teachers had said to them too. Then a text came through from a number I didn't recognize with a long message. The woman said her name was Imani Wu, and she was a legal advocate for immigrant families in our area. She'd seen my post through a friend of a friend and wanted to help me if I needed it. I was suspicious because I didn't know this person, but also desperate for someone who actually understood what we were going through. She called me that afternoon, and her voice was calm and professional, but also kind. She explained all my options, like filing official complaints with the school district and CPS about the social worker. She said we could also file something with OSHA about the warehouse where my dad died if there were safety problems. She broke everything down step by step, so it didn't feel so overwhelming and confusing anymore. For the first time since this all started, I felt like maybe I had some control over what happened next. Then another call came through from a man with a deep voice who sounded really upset. He said his name was Akeem, and he'd worked with my dad at the warehouse for 3 years. He said there was stuff about the accident I needed to know, and it wasn't right what happened. We set up a time to meet the next day, but I was nervous about trusting some stranger. Connie said she was coming with me whether I wanted her to or not for safety. She picked a coffee shop downtown that was public and always busy, so we'd be safe. She even looked up Akeem online to make sure he really worked at the warehouse like he said. I was actually grateful she was being protective, even though I wouldn't say it out loud to her. The coffee shop door opened, and this big guy walked in wearing a warehouse uniform with my dad's company logo on it. He spotted us right away and came over with his phone already out, hands shaking as he sat down. He didn't even say hello before he started swiping through photos on his screen, showing me picture after picture of broken safety rails and equipment held together with duct tape and wire. There was a forklift with no backup alarm and shelves that were bent from too much weight stacked on them. He showed me a photo from 3 months ago where a shelf had already started to lean and nobody fixed it. His voice got louder as he explained how my dad had complained to the supervisor every week about the same problems. He pulled up text messages between him and my dad where they talked about filing complaints with OSHA, but were scared of losing their jobs. My hands started shaking as I looked at a photo of the exact shelf that killed my dad, taken just 2 weeks before the accident. Akeem scrolled to an email my dad had sent to management listing 12 safety violations with photos attached. The response from the warehouse manager was just 3 words saying they'd look into it. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but Connie put her hand on my arm to calm me down. Akeem kept talking faster about how they were ignored everything because new equipment would cost thousands of dollars. Then he stopped and looked down at his hands for a long time before telling me something else. He said he was the one who sent me that weird text message during the lockdown at the school. He explained that when the shelf collapsed, he was the first one there and grabbed my dad's phone to call 911. He saw my number saved as Miho and just wanted me to know someone was trying to help, even though he didn't know how to explain who he was. Finding out who sent the text didn't make me feel any better about losing my dad. Later that afternoon, Imani called and set up an official meeting for the next morning at her office downtown. She told me to bring every text, email, and voicemail from the school and start taking screenshots of everything right away. She explained we needed to document every single thing that happened because the school would try to make this disappear. Having specific tasks to focus on helped me think about something other than the image of that broken shelf. I spent hours that night going through my phone and saving everything to multiple clouds and sending copies to Imani's email. The next morning, a letter arrived from the school district with fancy letterhead asking me to sign a form about reaching a mutual understanding. The language was all legal stuff about how both parties agreed there had been an unfortunate miscommunication during a difficult time. They wanted me to agree not to pursue any further action in exchange for them providing grief counseling services. I took a photo of every page and texted them to Imani, who responded immediately, telling me not to sign anything no matter what they offered. She said this was them trying to avoid a lawsuit and protect themselves from what the teachers had said. Oscar hadn't texted me in 2 days, which was weird, because we usually talked every day about random stuff. I saw him at the corner store buying chips, and when our eyes met, he looked away and pretended to read the ingredients on a candy bar. I walked over, and he finally admitted his parents had told him to stay away from me for a while. They didn't want any problems with the school because his older sister was applying for a scholarship, and they couldn't risk the school being mad at their family. He said he was sorry, but I told him I understood, because not everyone could afford to fight these battles. It still hurt watching him leave the store without our usual jokes about the weird snacks they sold. That afternoon, the CPS worker called while I was eating lunch and said they'd found contact info for my uncle Enrique through some database search. She explained they were starting something called a kinship assessment, which meant checking if he could take care of me. Her voice sounded bored as she warned me this process usually took months, and I shouldn't expect anything to happen quickly. But just hearing his name gave me the first real hope I'd felt since everything happened. I went through the box of papers Connie had helped me get from our apartment and found an old envelope with Uncle Enrique's phone number written in my dad's handwriting. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial the numbers and had to try 3 times before I got it right. When he answered, and I told him about Dad, he went completely quiet for a long time before I heard him crying on the other end. We hadn't talked in 2 years because of some fight about money that seemed so stupid now. He kept saying he was sorry over and over and promised he'd do whatever it took to get me out of foster care. Connie found out the school's insurance would cover therapy sessions and helped me fill out the forms for an intake appointment. Everyone kept saying I needed to talk to someone about my feelings, but I didn't want to sit in some office talking to a stranger. The appointment was scheduled for next week, and I was already making up excuses in my head for why I couldn't go. Imani filed the official complaint with the school district the next day and sent me a copy of everything she submitted. She requested something called a restorative justice conference, where the school would have to take responsibility for what happened. She explained it was better than going to court because it would be faster and might actually lead to real changes. The district had 30 days to respond, but she said they'd probably try to negotiate before then. A few days later, Akeem picked me up to go to the warehouse where the workers had set up a memorial for my dad. Walking into that huge building made my chest feel tight, and I could barely breathe seeing the place where he died. There was a table with his photo surrounded by candles and flowers and cards from his co-workers saying how much they'd miss him. I stood there looking at his picture, while Akeem pulled out a folder full of printed emails showing every time my dad had reported problems that got ignored. The next morning, Connie drove me to my first therapy appointment at this office building downtown, where everything smelled like vanilla candles and old carpet. The therapist was this older woman with glasses who kept nodding while I told her about what Miss Kelly and Mr. Doran said when they told me about Dad. She wrote stuff down on her yellow pad and said my anger was completely normal and that what they said was wrong and racist. It felt weird having someone with a degree basically confirm that I wasn't crazy for being mad about how they talked about my people while telling me my dad was dead. She gave me this worksheet about grief stages, but I just folded it up and stuck it in my pocket because I wasn't ready to think about that stuff yet. When I got back to Connie's house, there was an email from Miss Kelly on my phone that went on for like 3 pages. She kept saying how sorry she was and how she has Latino friends and goes to this Mexican restaurant every week so she's not racist. The whole thing was basically about how bad she felt and how she never meant to hurt me. But there was this one part where she admitted what she said. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded it to Imani, who texted back right away saying this was perfect evidence because Miss Kelly was basically confessing. The next day, the CPS worker called to schedule the home visit at Uncle Enrique's apartment for next week, and Connie sat down with me to go over what they'd probably ask. She pulled out this checklist showing they'd need to see he had a bedroom for me and proof of his income, and that he passed the background check. I kept telling myself not to get excited because stuff like this falls through all the time, but I couldn't help imagining living with actual family again. That afternoon, my phone started going crazy because someone had shared my story on this blog about immigrant rights in our city. I scrolled through the comments, and most people were being nice, saying they were sorry about my dad, but some were saying I was being dramatic or playing the race card. One person wrote this whole paragraph about how I should be grateful for foster care instead of complaining, and another said, "Immigrants always make everything about race." Imani called me after seeing the blog post and told me to stop reading the comments because they'd just mess with my head. She came over to Connie's house the next day with her laptop and taught me how to handle it if reporters started calling. She made me practice saying, "No comment," and "I'm working with legal counsel" over and over until it sounded natural. She kept reminding me that my story was powerful, but I didn't owe anyone my pain, and I could choose what to share and what to keep private. We wrote out this short statement I could send if people contacted me that basically said I was focusing on getting justice for my dad through proper channels. That night, Uncle Enrique called, and his voice was shaking when he told me his boss approved emergency family leave to deal with the kinship placement stuff. He said he was driving up next week for the home study and kept promising we'd make this work, no matter what it took. After we hung up, I went to the bathroom and cried for real for the first time since that first night in foster care. A few days later, the school district sent this official letter saying they agreed to the restorative conference, and Imani came over to help me figure out what I wanted to say. I told her I wanted them to do real bias training for all the teachers and staff, plus a formal apology that admitted what they did wrong. The district's lawyer sent back this counteroffer talking about a cultural sensitivity workshop, but Imani called them and said that wasn't good enough. She helped me write out exactly what happened and what I wanted them to do to fix it, so other kids wouldn't go through the same thing. Meanwhile, Akeem had been busy getting other warehouse workers together, and they filed the official OSHA complaint with all the photos and emails going back 2 years. He texted me pictures of the paperwork and said my dad would be proud that his death might actually save other people from getting hurt. The investigation would take months, but at least something was finally happening about all those safety problems my dad had been reporting. The day of the CPS home study, I was so nervous I threw up my breakfast, but Uncle Enrique's apartment looked good, even though it was small. He'd cleaned everything and cleared out his home office to make a bedroom for me with a new bed and sheets from Target. The caseworker walked around taking pictures and asking him questions about his work schedule, and checking that the smoke detectors worked and stuff like that. She seemed happy with everything, but said the final approval would take another week of processing the paperwork. After she left, Uncle Enrique and I went to get coffee, and that's when Akeem met us to finally explain that text from the day my dad died. He started crying when he told me he was right there when the shelving unit fell, and he grabbed my dad's phone to call 911. He saw my number saved as Miho, and wanted me to know someone was with my dad and trying to help him, even though it was already too late. My phone buzzed that night with a text from Oscar saying he was sorry for pulling away and wanted to hang out again. He admitted he'd been scared of the whole situation, but seeing me fight back made him want to be better. We weren't back to being best friends, but at least he was trying to make things right. The next morning, I had my second therapy session, and the counselor spent the whole time helping me get ready for the restorative conference. She taught me this breathing thing where you count to 4 when stuff gets too intense. We practiced what I'd say if they tried to make excuses or turn things around on me. She had me write down my main points on index cards, so I wouldn't forget when I got nervous. I kept practicing the same sentence over and over about how their racism made everything worse. The therapist said it was okay to cry or get mad as long as I didn't completely lose it. After the session, Imani called with bad news about the social media stuff getting out of hand. The CPS worker was worried that all the attention might mess up my placement with Uncle Enrique. I had to make all my accounts private right away, even though people were still sharing my story. Imani helped me write one last public post, saying I was working through proper channels for justice. She said we needed to keep things quiet until everything was official with the placement. 3 days later, we all met at this big district building downtown for the restorative conference. Miss Kelly was already there, looking small and nervous in her chair. Mr. Adoran showed up late with sweat stains under his arms. There were 2 administrators I'd never seen before, plus this mediator lady with glasses. My hands were shaking, so bad I could barely hold my statement paper. I started reading about how my dad died trying to give me a better life. My voice cracked when I got to the part about them saying my people don't follow safety rules. I told them how their racism made the worst day of my life even worse. Miss Kelly started crying before I even finished, and not the fake kind either. Real ugly crying with her makeup running down her face. She said she was sorry without any excuses and admitted what she said was racist and wrong. She promised to go to training and really look at why she thought those things. Mr. Doran took longer to get there, but finally admitted he made assumptions based on stereotypes. He said he'd been wrong to think kids from my background were all criminals. They both signed papers agreeing to attend monthly bias training for the rest of the school year. The district people agreed to make all staff do anti-bias training starting next month. They wrote up this formal apology letter that actually used the word racism instead of dancing around it. They also promised to review how they handle emergency situations so this wouldn't happen again. Imani squeezed my shoulder and whispered that we'd won even if it wasn't everything we wanted. 2 days after that, an OSHA investigator called asking for my official statement about the warehouse. They'd found a bunch of old citations that never got fixed, and complaints my dad filed that got ignored. The investigator said criminal charges probably wouldn't happen, but the company was looking at huge fines. I spent an hour on the phone telling them everything Akeem had shown me about the safety problems. They said my dad's death might actually save other workers from getting hurt. The same week, CPS finally approved the kinship placement with Uncle Enrique. They set the move date for the following Tuesday, which meant I only had a few days left at Connie's. She seemed really happy for me when I told her and started helping me pack right away. We went to the store to get boxes, and she bought me a new backpack for my new school. I felt bad about leaving since she'd been nothing but nice to me this whole time. The night before the move, I was folding clothes when I realized how good Connie had been to me. She never pushed when I kept my walls up or got mad when I was difficult. I went to find her in the kitchen and thanked her for everything she'd done. She got all teary and said fostering wasn't about keeping kids forever. She said it was about helping them find where they really belonged. Tuesday morning, Uncle Enrique pulled up in his old truck looking nervous but excited. We loaded my stuff, which wasn't much since most of Dad's things were still in storage. The drive to his apartment took an hour, and we listened to Dad's favorite radio station the whole way. His place was small, but he'd worked hard to make it nice for me. He'd turned his home office into my bedroom with a new bed from Target and fresh paint on the walls. There were some of Dad's things he'd saved, like his work boots and favorite coffee mug. We ordered takeout from the Mexican place Dad always loved and sat on the couch eating. Uncle Enrique told me stories about when him and Dad were kids that I'd never heard before. We looked through old photos on his phone and laughed at Dad's terrible haircut from high school. It wasn't home yet, but it was family, and that was enough for now. 3 days later, the mail came with this thick envelope from the school district, and I tore it open while Uncle Enrique made breakfast. The letter had all this official language, but basically they admitted their staff said racist stuff and promised everyone would do monthly training for the rest of the year. There was a whole schedule attached showing which days each teacher would attend, and they'd signed it with the superintendent's actual signature, not just a stamp. Imani called right as I finished reading and said the district actually followed through better than she expected, but we could still push for more if I wanted. I told her I was done fighting for now and just wanted to focus on getting used to living here and dealing with everything. She understood and said to call if anything changed, but honestly, I just felt tired of the whole thing. The next morning, my phone rang early, and it was some government number, so I almost didn't answer. But Uncle Enrique made me pick up. The OSHA investigator on the other end started reading these findings about the warehouse, and my hands started shaking. They found 17 different safety violations going back 3 years, including the exact shelving unit that killed my dad, which had been reported as unstable 6 times. The fines added up to almost $400,000, and the company had 60 days to fix everything, or they'd be shut down completely. The investigator said criminal charges probably wouldn't happen, but the civil penalties were some of the highest they'd ever issued for a workplace death. I wrote down all the case numbers and violation codes while Uncle Enrique watched me with tears in his eyes. It wouldn't bring Dad back, but at least other workers might not die the same way. Akeem called that weekend saying he'd organized something at the community center for my dad and asked if we could come. Uncle Enrique drove us there, and when we walked in, there were probably 60 people already inside with photos of Dad set up on tables. People I'd never seen before came up telling stories about how Dad helped them fix their car or gave them rides to work when their truck broke down. One lady said Dad taught her husband English during lunch breaks at the warehouse. Another guy said Dad covered his shifts when his wife was having their baby. Akeem had made this whole slideshow with pictures from the warehouse, including ones of Dad smiling at some company picnic I didn't even know about. Everyone signed this big poster board, and somebody's kid drew a picture of Dad as an angel, which made me lose it completely. Uncle Enrique held me while I cried, and people just kept sharing memories for over an hour. Oscar showed up at Uncle Enrique's place the next afternoon with his Xbox and a bag of chips, like nothing had changed. We set up in the living room and played Call of Duty for 3 hours straight without talking about any of the heavy stuff. He died like 50 times because he sucked at the game, but kept respawning and trying again. Uncle Enrique brought us sodas and watched for a bit, asking questions about the controls, which made Oscar laugh. We didn't need to talk about his parents making him stay away or how he came back when it mattered. Sometimes being there is all that counts, and Oscar got that without me having to explain it. My phone buzzed around dinner with a text from Connie asking how I was settling in. She said she was proud of how I handled everything with the school and the lawyers and wanted me to know her door was always open if I needed anything. I saved her number as Connie Foster Mom and actually meant it when I texted back that I'd keep in touch. She sent a thumbs up and a heart emoji, which was such a mom thing to do, it made me smile. The next week I had therapy, and the counselor asked me to think about goals for the next few months. I told her I wanted to finish junior year without failing anything and keep all my dad's paperwork organized in case OSHA needed more information. She helped me write down visiting Dad's grave once a month and keeping a journal about memories of him before I forgot stuff. We made a whole list, including eating better and not staying up all night on my phone, which seemed impossible, but she said we'd work on it slowly. She kept saying I was making good progress processing everything, but honestly, I just felt numb most of the time. Imani sent an email with attachments showing the district was actually doing the training they promised. She forwarded me the attendance sheets with signatures and even some feedback forms where teachers wrote about examining their biases. The CPS notes showed my placement with Uncle Enrique was stable with no concerns, and she highlighted the part that said I was thriving in the new environment. She ended the email saying I should be proud of standing up for myself and making sure my dad's memory meant something. That night, Uncle Enrique pulled out these old photo albums I didn't know existed, and we sat on the couch with a tub of mint chocolate chip ice cream. There were pictures of Dad as a kid in Mexico, and him and Uncle Enrique as teenagers doing stupid stuff. One showed Dad at his first job here washing dishes with the biggest smile, even though he was an engineer back home. We looked at my baby pictures and Dad teaching me to ride a bike, and that time we went camping, and he burned everything we tried to cook. Uncle Enrique told me stories about each photo while we passed the ice cream back and forth getting brain freeze. We were both still sad and angry about what happened, but sitting there looking at Dad's whole life made me realize we had each other now, and maybe things really would be okay eventually. Thanks for hanging out with me through all of this today, folks. Kinda wild to share all these thoughts with you, and I really appreciate you sticking around till the end. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.